One of the most beautiful tales of the Pacific Islands is told by women in the form of tapa cloth. The rhythmic sound of women beating the mulberry bark is a ritual shared by every island nation. Each Pacific Island culture calls this bark cloth by a different name, but they all know it also as tapa, and its patterns and uses echo the heritage and rituals of daily life. How might architecture draw inspiration from such a tale? Niuean New Zealand artist John Pule saw these fabrics as incarnations of an architecture. By this he meant an organization of space, a constitution of the environment, a working of nature that made it habitable and gave it an aesthetic. He also thought they were like portraits and stories, expressions of particular lives. In Niue, tapa is called hiapo. John Pule drew inspiration from hiapo, translating it into his own unique form of contemporary art. His paintings incorporate mythical monsters taken from island stories as well as from his own childhood dreams, navigation compasses that represent the instruments of contemporary global commerce and narratives of migration, stick figures that echo his earliest childhood drawings, the Christian cross to depict the impact of missionaries. Pule says, "I did my first paintings trying to almost copy hiapo. I was working in grids because that's what I saw. Hiapo was basically made up of grids, and then these pictures and storytelling. I was able to express myself and use all these things that I had been thinking and dreaming about, building them up, putting them into this hiapo architecture and a Polynesian way of looking at things." When I teach, I invite each of my students to draw inspiration from their own unique cultural and personal identity. One of my young Pasifika architecture students lamented to me that she had spent most of her life in New Zealand and knew little of her ancestry. Her grandparents still lived on the tiny, remote island of her homeland, but Kafoa had not been there since she was a small child, and she remembered little of the language. I asked Kafoa if she might telephone her grandmother each week, asking her to recall the rituals of her island nation. Her maternal grandmother happily agreed, but she stipulated that she would only tell Kafoa the stories in their native language, which she would speak slowly, and it was Kafoa's role to safeguard these stories for her own daughter someday and for her daughter's daughter. John Pule has described tapa as incarnations of an architecture made up of grids that invite storytelling. So Kafoa began to create her own architectural tapa with her own grid, each square room representing one of the sequential tales told by her maternal grandmother. The tales describe the ritual stages in transforming from a young girl into a young woman during the wedding ceremony. Each of these stages, Kafoa translated into an architectural room, using a single column to represent the young girl transforming during each of the sequential rituals. The first room of Kafoa's architectural tapa is about innocence, and the final room is about wisdom. And when the architectural model is folded at its pivot point, both the innocence of the young girl and the wisdom of the woman come together and become one. Kafoa called her architectural tapa, "I Remember." And Kafoa now is the mother of her own little girl.